Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be moderating this closing debate of the ISEAL Sustainability Policy Forum, and I'm delighted to have this dynamic panel here to close the day. Let's be direct. As we've said, the clock is ticking towards 2030, and the urgency is real. This is a pivotal moment for people and planet, and getting sustainability right has never been more critical than now. And mandatory rules are playing crucial roles. They set the floor, they establish a level playing field. But as we've heard today, regulation is not enough. Voluntary approaches are proven useful tools that can raise the bar, they can spur innovation, they can deliver real impact on the ground. And in this phenomenal panel, representing the nexus of policy, trade, standards, and corporate action spanning Europe and the global stage, we'll discuss closing the gap. What actions do we need to take to 2030? How do we achieve sustainability impacts while ensuring policy coherence and simplification, while enhancing business competitiveness? Together we'll explore what it will take to get to 2030. And constructive criticism is welcome. Let's be provocative. Let's be bold. Let's inspire hope and action. We'll focus first on what actions are needed in Europe to achieve the sustainability transition, and then we'll pivot to a more global scope. So let's dive in. Anna Cavazzini, MEP Cavazzini, as a member of the European Parliament, what's your level of confidence that European policymakers are going to do the right thing to support the sustainability transition within Europe and globally?
Thank you so much for the invitation, and I hope you had an exciting conference. Sorry that I missed the first part, but I was actually the whole day busy in the Parliament. Nevertheless, happy to be here. And I think it is indeed important to talk about optimism and probably also parameters that make the sustainable transition necessary and possible. And there is, I would say, a lot of hope around. Like, I don't know, some economic factors are just speaking in our favor. Just when you look at the renewable energy explosion that is even also happening now in the US, in Republican states, or just a very tiny anecdote from my daily life as an MEP. I have now 50,000 German companies writing me because the EPP next week wants to forbid veggie burger and veggie sausages, and all the companies are going crazy because the consumers want it. So there is a lot of change already happening. There's so much change on the ground. And this is absolutely positive. And I think the EU and also here the economic data show that with so many, for example, zero tech industries where we are leading in the world, and where also there is the understanding with companies that we have to continue this path. This gives me hope. When I look at the European Parliament, I have a little bit of less hope at the moment right now. This is really, I would say, due to the fact that this combination of, extreme right actors all over the world pumped a lot of money, not only fighting the migration narrative, but also the climate and green transition narrative, and the conservatives being super under pressure from the far right, plus economic recession in parts of Europe. And this combination makes a little bit of a toxic atmosphere, I would say, right now in the European Parliament. But I think we also proved that some of the votes in the last half year, are still working. Sometimes often pro-European majorities are still working, and I think we just need, again, more pressure from stakeholders, more pressure from citizens, to have a little bit this counterbalance against this narrative that the green transition is dead and it's bad for Europe. I think when this pressure comes back, then I'm also more positive, probably when it comes to the parliamentarians.
Thank you, MEP Cavazzini. So some optimism in Brussels and some hope for pushback. The pendulum will swing the other way in Germany. Director Verhoeven, DG GROW is crucial, plays a huge role in the sustainability transition and responsible business conduct. A lot of debate has been about the how and the what of sustainability. And that's really important for business resilience, for competitiveness, for the sustainability landscape. Given the urgency of sustainability, how do we bring the how and the what together? What's how to clarify the policy environment for business? What's your take?
Well, thank you very much first for the invitation, and indeed, I would like to pick up on what Anna Cavazzini say. I'm actually also hopeful. Yeah. First of all, I will not speak for the Commission as a whole, but I will refer to our President. And I think our President is very clear, was also very clear in the State of the Union that we stay course. Yeah? For us, the Green Deal is not dead. And sustainability, which is actually broader, which is an expression also of our core values as the European Union, is certainly not dead. Having said that, what we have learned is that we have to basically marry sustainability with competitiveness and with innovation. And that we need to bring together. And that means for me, as a team as well, that we have to think about the business case for sustainability. And that's what we are working on. And in order to achieve that, simplification certainly is necessary. And we've started with the omnibus. We're all now waiting to see what is coming out of that. There might be some further needs to bring more coherence because the omnibus is only targeting a part of the acquis. And we will need to bring coherence everywhere through having a very hard look at the acquis, but also making sure that we are very smart and coherent in the way we're going to implement it. And then another element that I think has been missing too much from the puzzle so far is the incentives part. Businesses are willing to go sustainable, but they're also thinking, what's in for me? So where are the incentives we're building? And that's why we need to bring this debate closer to all the efforts that we do in order to promote clean industries. And we have answers. We have the Clean Industrial Act. We have net zero industries. We are working on the implementation of that. And these are the areas where all these policies come and should come together. We should be seeing how to lever on incentives as well, next to making sure that we have state-of-the-art rules which are feasible to be implemented by businesses and which, above all, are coherent across the acquis. That would be my pitch.
Thank you, Amaryllis. Turning to you, Stefan, you have decades of experience at CSR Europe thinking about business needs, and there's a lot of talk about simplification and now coherence and incentives. What do businesses in Europe really want and need from policymakers to advance the sustainability agenda?
No, thank you very much. And actually, all the things that Amaryllis was saying, that's actually on our wish list on that. I think where I speak from CSR Europe is actually from two realities. One is a reality of drive sustainability, which is a voluntary standard in automotive industry, which is spread out over more than 100,000 tier 1 companies now, 160,000 supplier plants. And there they work every day on not only compliance, but how to improve. And that's an important element, I think, in legislation. How does that lead to improvement, or how does that support improvement, and how do you build the capacity for that? I think amfori later will talk about that as well. How do you engage with your suppliers, and does legislation lead to that, and what kind of policy measures can be taken in terms of capacity building? And Amaryllis knows very well what we say about. A second reality that from which I talk is the European CSO network. So a network of practitioners that created this better regulation paper towards the Commission. And this is about how can you make legislation work in terms of impact that it will have, because we share the purpose. Businesses or the Commission in certain sense shares the same purpose. But the reality, and that is something that I didn't pick up that much today, the reality has changed since the Green Deal was established. Our economy is not in a recession, but is in a more competitive difficulty. There are other markets that are competing with us. The reality in other markets has changed. So that means also something, how can we link those efforts? And I think part of the political backlash is because of the legislation which is too much in silos, a lot top-down. I heard that earlier today in terms of implementation, and also not leading to rewards. I'm glad when you let the word incentive, because I think from the CSO network, that is an important element, especially now with all the changes in legislation. The board, they say, yeah, but what's the value for us in doing all that? What is the reward? So I think the element of coherence is important, and the element of how to reward the efforts. And for that, the European Commission has other policies, the trade policies, the public procurement policies, etc. And it should be more brought together, we think, than just each one separate from a compliance perspective. Into that.
Thank you, Stefan. And Linda, at amfori you have 2,500 business members, and you also manage a sustainability system yourself. What do you see as the ways that mandatory rules and voluntary sustainability systems are going to support European coherence, competitiveness, and sustainability?
Now let's focus on the role of voluntary schemes here. And I really want to come back to hope and complexity, because I think that's where I think amfori is at that crossroads. amfori once started as a voluntary initiative by some companies who said we can work together, not only on, say, advocacy with regards to sustainable trade in Brussels, but also we can work together in improving the conditions within our supply chain. And I think that's where the hope comes from, and that's where progressive companies come from. And I'm a positive person, and I really believe that we have made change. You know, and many companies have already started a journey. They're in the omnibus, to put it in those words. But we also know that quite some companies have the ambition to really meet the expectations, but just don't know how to do it and how to start. And we have companies with all different levels of maturity that we will need to see how, how they can be supported. And that's what we do with amfori. That's, I think, the beauty of a voluntary scheme. That's the beauty of collaboration, that we work together and take away some of the things that you don't need to do on your own, whether it's that having this robust code of conduct, whether it's having joint capacity building for the suppliers of our members, because we really help them with identifying the risk, the sustainability risk within the supply chain, and how then, how would you then reduce and mitigate those risks to prevent it from happening again, but also lead into reporting initiative. And I think there is more need than ever to have this kind of collaboration to really avoid, say, duplication of efforts, because that's in the current, say, competitive landscape, you put it nicely, but it's a challenging economic environment out there at this point for companies. So everyone is looking for solutions to really reduce efforts and find ways to do it smarter. So what we do with the tools that we have, it's based on international standards, and those are very important, as already said and mentioned, also in the legislation. But based on those standards, there's one methodology that applies everywhere. Across the globe, our members come from 50 countries, the suppliers come from, I think, from 120 plus countries, and the standards are the standards. And I think that's where I think we create, say, this opportunity for everyone to step up and understand what the growing expectations are. And we are not a substitute for regulation, really, to say it here. And we're also not a safe harbor. And I also want to have said that here. I know that I need to stop here, because I think that's really important. We offer tools and we offer joint collaboration, have a robust code of conduct, but we don't take the company decisions where they need to focus on. So we're not a safe harbor, we're offering them the helping hand.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah, in your example, we're seeing the role of regulation and the role of sustainability tools in supporting companies in that coherence and collaboration. And Secretary General Yao, you work closely with business and government at the nexus of trade and competitiveness and sustainability. And you're the founder also of a new organization, ODCCN, in Geneva, based on trade and standards work. What's needed from sustainability standards and policymakers for developing country stakeholders to play a role in the European sustainability transition?
Thank Yeah. So I'm glad to join today's discussion. So I think I would like to share the 4 points. The first is the fair competition, because the developing countries need standards that ensure the fair competition. So if sustainability rules become the green barriers, the developing country business will never be able to catch up. And what is needed is a framework that is ambitious but also proportional. That is, means the companies, especially of the small and medium-sized company from different countries, can participate in the market rather than be excluded. So this is the first one. And the second is, I think, is a fair cost transition, because as we know, and the developing countries do not need more requirements, and they need a fair policy environment. So when Europe introduces new regulations, it must consider how to avoid shifting disproportionate costs onto the supplies in developing country economy. So for example, the last week, I joined the EABC, East Asia Business Council meeting. So that is considered by the 10+3 is 10 ASEAN country plus CJK, their Chamber of Commerce. So one of the discussing, they say there are a lot of the sustainability rules, policies, regulation from the EU. So for the Asian country, especially different country, they should spend a lot of time to learn what's the new policy in EU. Yeah, so I think the public policy should therefore design the transition support mechanism, and such as grace period and financial channels, so that the developing country have time and the resource to adapt. And the number 3 is reducing the fragmentation of standards and the policies. So what developing countries need is not just the mutual recognition between the Europe and its market, but a more coordinated international framework. So otherwise, the fragmentation of policies and standards will weaken global supply chain efficiency, increase costs, and ultimately slow down the sustainability transition. And the number 4 is, I think, is two-way learning. So cooperation could be the two-way. Europe can support the developing country, but it should also can learn from the developing country. So we think through our global observation, we have seen some digital tools and the low-cost green innovation emerging in China or in Southeast Asia countries. So that are valuable lessons. So I think only through the mutual learning can sustainability be a process of co-creation, not a one-way imposition. So from the perspective of the global south or different country, the real need is not simply more standards or more policies, but better designed policies and tools. They need a framework that are practical, affordable, and supportive, so they can join the sustainability transition without being left behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. And Stefan, building on, Linda, would you like to come in?
Yeah,
please.
Yeah, if I just may quickly, Jack, and I understand where your response comes from. I hear that very often when I travel in Asia Pacific. I think we also should acknowledge there's many Asian countries who are coming up with legislation that is, say, more or less as similar as element that we are doing here in Europe. And I think for me, the key thing here is that if you all can agree that we found and based this legislation in the same international standards and guidance, that's where we will meet each other. And I agree with you with the pace, but I also see many Asian companies who already have stepped up the plate and are already meeting these requirements and are preparing for what's happening from a European perspective. I think we should acknowledge that too.
Thank you, Linda. And Stefan, building on this topic, what do you think the role of policy will be to allow the private sector to play a more transformational role and leveraging voluntary tools in this global transition?
Well, I think it's a more supportive role, and now it was perceived, the legislation that came out through the Green Deal, especially on CS3D and the reporting and EUDR, etc., was kind of compliance-oriented. How can you create a policy framework that supports and builds or supports the building, the creation of a kind of ecosystem that promotes sustainable behavior by companies. That is something, and that goes then with those elements that we mentioned earlier. Of course, I think also there's an element, we have to be a little bit more modest in what we try to achieve. There is an element of continuous improvement. My background is Toyota, so continuous improvement is very important. But that element is a little bit lacking, as if everyone knows what double materiality is, as if everyone knows what good stakeholder engagement in a company is. I'm sorry, companies do not know that always just like that. But if it's kind of commanded that you have to do, it goes in all directions. And it's good consulting business, but so there I think there is a lot of element from a policy side, make it more coherent, invest in capacity building, awareness raising and capacity building, engage also, and that's an investment agenda is needed. And sustainability is an investment agenda, basically. We want responsible sourcing of our battery materials, invest in the conditions in which battery materials are sourced. And that's a real investment agenda and not just one-off projects. And I think the EU is trying, the Commission is trying with, for example, Global Gateway, but it becomes very fragmented. And so more coherence, the word coherence, Amaryllis, I think is very important. Someone needs to bring that coherence that we can advance on that agenda. So that would be supportive to companies because they are not against legislation, sustainability legislation, because it helps them to mature internally as well. And when we looked at in the CSO network, they say it helps us to bring the agenda forward in our company, but also it helps them to advance together with the others. So there is no at the level playing field and then to advance with others. But there is more needed aside it. You cannot just make a legislation or reporting or supply chain due diligence. Please do. No, there is a bigger responsibility for a European Commission or a European Union, we think.
Thanks, Stefan. Amaryllis, back to you. Hearing all of these thoughts, criticisms, comments, what do you see, what stands out for you as what you'd like to emphasize is Europe's role in this international sustainability arena?
Well, I would like to emphasize two things. First of all, we can't do it alone as Europe. I think that's also an important message. We have to build partnerships, meaning engaging in dialogues with other countries around the globe. And we see, and it was mentioned already, that quite a number of countries are investing more into a sustainability agenda, are also thinking about incentives and reward systems. Let's engage in that dialogue and let's see what kind of partnerships we can build. Then the second thing is, if we want to be an example in the rest of the world, we need to continue to put our own house in order, and really bring together the sustainability agenda with the competitiveness agenda and with also the innovation agenda. Exactly what I mentioned before. Make sure that there is a business case and that we effectively innovate in these areas. And again, there I am hopeful because we are actually looking at a number of these issues quite closely right now. And that's on the one hand coherence building, but also looking at incentives. I just give you already the example, for instance, within DG GROW, we're working on the review of the public procurement rules. That's an excellent opportunity to think how to incentivize certain behaviors. What is it you go for? And how to make it easy. We've been talking for years about green and social procurement. It's awfully difficult. Can we not make this easier, right? That's one question. But we are also working on tools that could be really easy, like the TPP, the digital product passport. So we're really looking at in our current toolbox and possible other toolboxes in order to make the system work. Yeah? And make the competitiveness and sustainability agendas meet. And I think if we manage to have that together, then we will be even better equipped to engage at a global level.
Thank you, Amaryllis. Yeah. those policies, you have a lot of leeway to pick which types of sustainability tools can support you in that, and a big role to play. And Anna, from the Parliament perspective, where do you stand on this, getting this balance of impacts and simplification and
yeah, excellent and very complex question. I would say there is indeed, first of all, a lot of other parameters that we need to get in check. For example, the demand side, that was probably a little bit neglected in the last term. And now I think, you know, also the Parliament, the Commission asking or working on lead markets, reform the procurement, the Draghi report calling for vast amounts of investment, public and private, in order to make it happen. So there is other very important parameters than only regulation, definitely. And I also agree that probably our regulation was too fragmented and, for example, definitions not aligned, and so on and so on and so on. So I think there's a lot of good things that can be simplified, one reporting tool and not 50 different, and so on and so on. And I think one also really good example where it worked well in the Parliament, where there was broad acceptance, was the reform of the CBAM, saying, okay, if we really want to target 99% of the companies, let's target them, but this 1%, that really makes no sense to count every screw that I'm importing, so let's get rid of it. So there's also a learning curve, I think, and also a quick adaptation mechanism if necessary. But there is, of course, also more divisive aspects, and you all know about it, because, of course, I would say not the Parliament, but half of the Parliament is of the opinion that sometimes the simplification agenda goes too far. And, of course, it cannot mean that we take back some of the regulation we put forward, even without proper impact assessments, without the laws being in place, or without any empirical evidence. And I think we also hear from a lot of companies, but probably you can correct me if I'm wrong, that, you know, also legal certainty and planning stability is an important point. And if you go back and forth all the time, it probably also doesn't give such a good sign. So I would say, from a green perspective, you know, we are all in favor of having very concrete working simplification efforts, but trying to not basically open or redirect the general course we are going, and this is very important for us.
Thank you so much, Anna. And now, Jack, turning back to China, and China's role in ESG and green trade is growing and growing. Are we going to see more of a Beijing effect rather than a Brussels effect?
Oh, sorry, I'm always stealing.
Okay, thank you. So, according to the progress report of China's national carbon market, China's emission trade system ETS already covered more than 5.1 billion tons of carbon dioxide, over the 40% of the national emission, making it the largest in the world. And we also find the World Economic Forum Bayern report 2025 projected that by 2030, the market in China could reach 56 to 84 billion US dollar annually, covering nearly 9 to 11 billion tons. So these figures show that the carbon pricing and the emission trading in China has already materialized and scaled up. Another story is the last year, the Ministry of Commerce in China established a standardization working group on green trade. And the last month, the China's national standard body, SAC, established a national standardization committee on ESG. So that means now Chinese government has integrated the standardization on the trade and the ESG into the government policy. So you may call this the Beijing effect, but in my view, Beijing here is only a symbol. And what it really represents is, I would call the market effect. So influence that does not come from the exporting rules, but from the scale and the practice of functioning the green markets. So I think it's not about the one city or one country lead the world. So it is about the showing the large scale implementation, and the functioning market can complement the Europe's regulation leadership. And it must remain open and inclusive, so that the scales does not become a new barrier. Only in that way can this factor contribute positively to the shared global sustainability transition? Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. And Linda, we've been hearing about the bumps in the road on the policy track, or little dips. And should we rely on policy to set the enabling environment, or can voluntary initiatives play a bigger role?
Well, I think it's not a either or, it's both really to start with. And yes, we need policy that's doable, that's found in international standard, that's understandable, that's clear, that's concise, and is really approaching us to some extent from a practical level, because you use the word, say, complexity, and simplification, but what we currently see happening is that simplification might not lead to simplification, rather more than complexity. So I think it's a good thing to say we want less administrative burden. Yes, I'm in favor, coming from business here, but maybe there is unintended consequences, say, from that choice now, where we need to be really very much aware of. So yes, we need policy, we need legislation, but you also need business. We need business to, accept the legislation and really live up to it. Give them time to do so, because businesses are not perfect. And even what we would consider maybe now good examples, they will still have issues somewhere at this point in time at the world, because no one is perfect. So we also need to give them the time to improve, going back to your continuous improvement that you mentioned, which I really think is important. And I think voluntary standards serve a need to. Amfori BCI, our social product and most known, is now more than 20 years, started 2003. And that was really grown organically. So the need for a standard, the need for a robust auditing methodology, the need for credibility, integrity, I think is there. And we are a strong advocate for we need legislation, but it needs to be risk-based, it needs to be doable, it needs to create this level playing field, not to repeat here the obvious. One thing I want to add, and I'm not sure who said the word modesty, but I think modesty is important also from a European perspective. I'm from the Netherlands, you probably might hear that from my accent, but also in my country not everything is perfect. Next door to where I live, there's agriculture. I'm pretty sure when, for example, you're harvesting asparagus, there is people that are not being treated well. So I think we also need to look into our own kitchen and make sure that's being brought into order. And I think that's one of the things that also like in legislation, it's not only looking at outside Europe, it also applies to inside Europe. And I think that's important to acknowledge, well, that's important, but also to understand how we then can, address those issues. And some of those issues can also not be addressed alone by companies. There needs to be either a collective approach or the collaboration with not only government, but also with civil society to find ways to advance. I'm going to stop here now because I think you are short on time.
Mm-hmm. We have, I think, 2 minutes left. Thank you. Thank you all. We've been talking about a lot of important topics, the complexity of the smart mix of voluntary and mandatory, the role of government, the role of business, the need to collaborate and be humble. I'll just go down the line, starting with you, Linda, and then right down the line. In 30 seconds, what is the one action that you would like to see policymakers take to get us really supercharged on the road to 2030?
Very practical. Take a decision. That gives clarity. That's my 2 cents here.
Mine is regulate and stimulate. That would be the one.
Nice. Or, yeah. What would you like to see your fellow lawmakers do?
I probably have one demand to the company side. I would like to have, from the company side, a more honest discussion on why we are in the recession right now, because I have the feeling a lot of the companies I talk to say it is the due diligence law, but I'm not sure if a due diligence law that is not even in place causes the recession. But a lot of German companies tell me that. So I want from the company side that want a sustainable change, a more proactive approach on the narrative.
I agree with you.
Okay, yeah, so for one action, okay. So for one action, I think is establish the concrete the transition support mechanism. Yes, so such mechanism should ensure standards reduce the barrier, not to create the new barrier, so can create opportunity, not close the door. Thank you.
Thank you. Amaryllis?
I would say clear, easy to use, and coherent frameworks is one wish, and the other wish is incentives to innovate in this area.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our panelists. We've had a constructive, inspiring debate about the role of regulation and market-based approaches. Let's hope that we can carry this energy forward and continue our collaboration toward a more sustainable future. On behalf of ISEAL, I want to express my sincere thanks to this incredible panel. And before I hand the mic back to Emma, let's give our panel a big round of applause.